Welcome to yet another webinar that is put on by the Embassy of the Bahamas here in Washington, D.C. in collaboration with the consulate offices all over the United States of America. And we are so delighted that you have all joined us today in this webinar, and we trust that we are going to have an exciting time. It's Independence Time in the Bahamas, and today on our program, we are going to talk about our country, the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, where it is now, and of course, where you believe it ought to be going. And we are privileged to have as guests on this webinar today, Dr. Peter Blair, who is a professor and he is an assistant professor at Harvard Graduate School of Education, where he co-directs the project on workforce. Also here today, Oleme Olirin, I believe we have the name right. She is from St. John's University School of Law, and she is a public defender during the Legal Aid Society in New York City. Gertrude Tinker Sachs, who is a PhD in curriculum development, and she is well known, especially from her days at the then College of the Bahamas. We have Dr. Laura Roseanne Adderley, a PhD in history, and she is at Tulane University in New Orleans. Scott Turnquest, who is a person dealing with economics. He is Vice President of Engineering at True Link Financial. And we also have Cordell Clare, who is a member of the New York State Senate, the 30th District. It's a pleasure having all of you here today. Good afternoon to you, and I would like for you to better introduce yourselves to our audience in this webinar. And so let's begin with Dr. Blair. Okay, since Dr. Blair is not available, should we then go to Gertrude Tinker Sachs?
Hello, everybody. My name is Gertrude Tinker Sachs. I'm a teacher from SC McPherson Junior High School and the T.G. Glover Primary School. I was born, bred, and educated in Nassau, Bahamas. Went to graduate school in Toronto, University of Toronto at OISE. And then from there, I was in Hong Kong for 12 years, and I've been here in the United States at Georgia State University, where I am a professor of language and literacy and department chair of the Department of Middle and Secondary Education, and I've been here almost 20 years.
Very good. Good to have you here on our panel today.
Thank you.
Oleme Olirin.
Hi, my name is Olayemi Olurin. Y'all can call me Ole. Everybody make your life easy.
Good.
Born and raised in Nassau, but my daddy is Nigerian. That's the name. I moved to the U.S. for school in 2008. I lived in Florida for a year, and then I went to boarding school in West Virginia. Then I went to college in Ohio, where I studied political science, pre-law, and I went to law school on a scholarship to St. John's. I finished, took the bar, became a public defender at the Legal Aid Society, and I am a political commentator, and I am a host of Rising on the Hill, which is why I'm in DC presently.
Very good. Dr. Roseanne Adderley.
Good afternoon. There's construction here, so I've been turning the mute on. I am Roseanne Adderley. Laura is my first legal name, and this is, so I'm trying to use it because the university requires it. I'm an accidental immigrant. I came to the US for school in, heaven help me, 1983. I went to QC and finished A levels there. Then came here 2 years of high school in Massachusetts. I was very divided between teaching and going to law school, and ended up staying here and doing a PhD in history at the University of Pennsylvania. I'm a slavery and slave trade historian. I work a lot on the 19th century illegal slave trading, which is actually responsible for about 20% of the Bahamian population, descended from people who came aboard slaves that were illegal. And I have taught at Tulane University for most of the past 25 years in New Orleans. I tell people that what I love living in New Orleans is that Miami and New York are North American cities with a lot of Caribbean people in them. This is the closest thing to a Caribbean city that I have found in North America. So that is what.
Thank you very much. Let's hear from Cordell Claire.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. I am a product of New York City Public Schools. I am the daughter of two proud Bahamian parents who are no longer with me, but they left a lot here with me inside of my heart and in my spirit. They were fighters, and I didn't know they tricked me into becoming one too. So I've been a community activist and advocate for all of my adult life. And some of these fights have led me into the political arena. And now, you know, I'm a part of a profession that I swore I would never join. But you have to never say never, because there are many ways to fight, I've learned. And I combine the skills that I use as an activist and as an advocate, and I fight from where I sit. My parents always taught me that you belong. They taught me that speak truth to power, no matter what, even if you're afraid, and stand up for people who can't stand up for themselves. And that's what I practice, and that's what I try to do every single day. I'm up for re-election this summer, but I'm very happy to be here and just be a part of the conversation. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so very much. We're going to talk about why you're in politics in New York rather than in the Bahamas in a short while. But let's hear from Scott Turnquest.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Really happy to be here. So like Ambassador Jones said, my name is Scott Turnquest. I grew up in Nassau. I graduated from SAC, and from there moved to college in the US in Minnesota. I've been fairly nomadic. I've lived in most regions in the US and a bit of a stint in the UK as well. And my career has largely been in tech at VC funded startups. So today I head up the engineering org at a fintech called TrueLink Financial. So always happy to talk a little bit more about that path with people.
Very good. Thank you so very much. Thank you all for being here once again. And we're going to have a healthy conversation, I believe, on our country, the Bahamas. And these webinars are to bring the Bahamian diaspora together so that we can know who we have in the Bahamas, who are of Bahamian descent or ancestry, as well as to inspire young Bahamians who would be watching and listening to us today. As you know, we are celebrating independence throughout the Bahamas and in the United States, of course. The consulate offices have organized various events. And so it is my pleasure as the ambassador here to be the coordinator of these webinars. And so for starters, let me just ask you this question, and perhaps all of you can chime in and feel free to answer whenever you wish, or to join the conversation whenever you wish. In terms of where we are as a country, the Bahamas, going on 50 years after independence. Roseanne Adderley, how have we done as a country, as a small developing country?
I would say I think there are two things that we've done really well. Right? One is that for all the folks of tourism as an industry in which one can become over dependent, we have used that industry well to spread a good deal of middle and lower middle class income. That I was just talking to a friend of mine, a colleague from Antigua, and we had this conversation about how we've managed to spread like 7. That was the whole. Like, what are our options in comparison to other places in the Caribbean? And it's good fortune because we're on the doorstep of the United States, and it makes a lot of that, the Florida travel easy. And I think we've done that well. I think the second thing we've done really well is to cultivate an intentional sense of national identity. I think we're about to have heading up to the 50th about some arguments about what it means to be a Bahamian, but I think some at all levels and sectors of society, there's a sense that that should mean something, and that the nation is valued. And I look at the past couple of years have been very difficult with Dorian and the pandemic, and people fussing and carrying on social media, criticizing the government or this person or the next person. But the sense that the nation is a thing that we should care for and to do better, and it means something. And that to recognize in a very young nation, it's not a trivial thing. So I think that's what we've done well. I think what we have not done as well is that our independence was a part of a very heady moment in the late 60s, early 70s, when all of these post-colonial governments believed they could solve everything. All right, and whether or not that was a reasonable dream is an open question. I think it was, but I do think that we have fallen into too much influence from the complacency of our great neighbor to the north. That while a lot of the problems we have in terms of economic inequality, in terms of large segments of our society are left out of the kind of social supports and goods that we need to spread with the population is growing very quickly, and we've become accustomed to inequities. And I said to someone, the last conversation I had about this was about almost 10 years ago exactly, around the 40s. And I said, you know what we need? We need to start turning over British colonialism, becoming independent, building this country. It was unthinkable. It was unimaginable. So, you could vision it, but we didn't know it was going to work, and it did. And I want us to look at some of the social inequities we have and essentially say, we can have much, much better levels of literacy. We can spread this economic wealth in a more, I'll say it, socialistic way. We can do it. And so I want us to have a set of dreams as big as independence as we turn on this thing.
Let's talk a little bit about that with the identity of the Bahamas or Bahamian identity. Dr. Tinker Sachs, have we really developed that Bahamian identity that Dr. Adderley just spoke about?
Tell you the truth, I wish I could see a little bit more of it. And I have to say that I have been working in the Bahamas in schools. And so I can speak for what I see in schools, and I can speak from what I see of my own family members. And I was just in the Bahamas just about 2 or 3 weeks back to celebrate. I'm a SAC person myself, Scott, and to celebrate our anniversary of 50 years of graduating from St. Augustine's College. And just to get a feel for things, I think there is a strong Bahamian identity, despite being next to the United States. Because I think when you ask the question, how have we done? I ask the question, by whose standards? So when we talk about identity, which is very important for me as a Bahamian, I think it is something that you are born with, that is ingrained within you. It starts there from birth. And it has to be inculcated throughout our schooling system. And I think that is there. When you listen to the music, When people have parties, I listen to what they are dancing to. They're dancing to Bahamian songs. They have that calypso deep in their souls. When you look at Jonkanu, that is Bahamian identity. Now I might have some feelings about how I have seen the costumes evolve and develop over the years, but that's my opinion. But still, the identity is very strong and very powerful in the drumbeat. So it depends on what are we comparing to and what is our frame of reference when we talk about who we are as a people. When I think back to, I was a witness in 1973 when the Union Jack was lowered and the Bahamian flag was hoisted. I will tell you, nothing can change my Bahamianness because of that, being there present and going through everything we went through to be Bahamian, fully Bahamian, and not any longer a UK citizen. So it is what we are doing in our schools, what we are doing in our cultural traditions and traits. And I would say that those are just as strong and powerful today. But if you ask me about education, that's going to take a little while because I have a lot to say about it.
We'll probably get there. Let's go to Dr. Ole Larian,
Yes.
on the same topic of identity.
Okay, so first thing I want to say is I think the Bahamas has done incredibly well in the last since independence. If you look at a lot of the issues and the things that I'm going to touch on and our social issues that we have are present in much larger nations that have had a much longer time and much more resources and stuff to address. So nothing I say is to diminish or take away from the incredible strides we've made. Two, we have a strong Bahamian identity. I think there's a popular myth, I feel like criticism we get, especially when even from other Caribbean countries, to present us as though we don't have a strong identity because of our proximity to America. Or I think mostly it's that Bahamians tend to be in the Bahamas. I think you go to a place like New York and you see, I feel like there are more Caribbean people in New York City and these places than there are in the Caribbean. But if you want to find Bahamians, you go to the Bahamas, right? We have a couple of pinpoint spaces. You might find a few of us, but for the most part, we're home, which is why I know for a fact how strong our identity is. But importantly, I think living abroad is what makes you really realize how strong Bahamian identity is. I think growing up in the Bahamas, it was easy to not feel that as much, especially with I born and raised in Nassau. I've never been to Nigeria a day in my life, but I have a Nigerian name and a Nigerian daddy. So Bahamians felt like I was Nigerian. And growing up, I felt like that too. I think I felt like there was a distance from Bahamian identity and maybe didn't realize it as publicly. But after 15 years of being in America and being just as Bahamian as they come, just unhideable, you could sense it down the road immediately. I know for a fact our identity is strong. So I want to give us that. I think the issues that I think the greatest issue that I think can help the Bahamas in terms of impacting, it touches on all the other issues, is how we go about our education system in the sense of Bahamian history. Bahamians have a rich history that's hard to access. It's very, very often, I feel like a lot of the best Bahamian history, the best kept Bahamian secrets and knowledge die with the older Bahamians. You know, there's all kind of information now I wish I'd asked my Grammy because I can't get it from elsewhere. You have to go find Bahamian elders. You have to go home. You have to go talk to them. It shouldn't be that way, right? The other day I was looking into St. Vincent and they had tons of books I could buy and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I need us to put more of an investment in memorializing our history and our culture and traditions because we have them and it's rich. There's things that I see randomly. Sometimes I learn about the Bahamas and I'll be like, wow, I did not know that. I didn't recognize it. So I think we undersell our own history. And in doing that, we undersell our own identity. And I think we lean too much on things that keep Bahamians subservient, maybe if not even in application, but in terms of how we see ourselves when it comes to tourism, when it comes to the Commonwealth, when it comes to all these different ways, you know, that we sometimes dance for others when we need to. We could put that investment and that focus on us. And I think in doing that, you'd see a lot of different things that I think social issues that we're a little bit regressive on, you know, we haven't quite caught up. I think we would make headway. So my overall answer is I think Bahamian identity is very strong. I think we need to do a better job memorializing that and making that available to everyone, and especially even our youth, because I can only imagine, I considered myself a nerd, and in school, I was in history class, paying attention. I read everything that was in Making the Bahamas, and I realized now that Making the Bahamas had 1/300th of everything I should have known. Sometimes I learned stuff, someone will tell me about a riot behind the islands, and I'm like, I did not realize we were mobilized like this, we were resistant like this, we were doing all these things, and the different kind of change and influence, and we need to stop letting people tell our history, because I remember it always stands out of my mind. Making the Bahamas once said that Bahamians were a lazy people, but it said that based on the perception of lord proprietors, colonizers, and people who do that. We need to stop letting them create these narratives for us and teach it back to us as fact, because that's not the truth, right? It's not the truth. And if we believe that about ourselves, it stops our progress. So.
Okay. Cornell Claire, you are serving in New York, in the State Senate in New York, but happy to know that you are an out and out Bahamian. You said you were born in the Bahamas. And having served as you have in the United States, I'm sure you are quite aware that Bahamians feel very strongly about their country, as you heard expressed about the identity of the Bahamian. How do you feel about this whole question of Bahamians who have come to the United States of America, and some of them have lost their identity? We have a problem hearing you.
Forgot to unmute myself.
Okay.
Yes, that's a great question. And especially for someone like me who's been here my whole life. I came as a child. I've been educated here as a child from kindergarten on up. And I sadly did not get back to the Bahamas or to where my parents are from until my mother passed away just recently, well, 4 years ago. And but I'm going to say this about, I really loved what Ole said, because in identifying Black here in the United States, you don't get even that history taught to you. And you really don't get Bahamian history because it's not available like that. My parents were able to give me some of the culture, but to learn the things of the Bahamas, I think is just so critical. And in New York, we were also fortunate because there was a Bahamian American Association that existed in Harlem for over 100 years. But still, we didn't get enough from that because it may not even be available. So speaking to what Ole talked about, that history is so important for people to be able to go back and trace and understand. I know a lot of history has been lost in my family with my grandparents who have passed, great-grandparents who have passed. It wasn't a written history, and it's hard to find it. I always loved the Bahamas for this reason. It was a love-hate. All my friends would come back and tell me how wonderful the Bahamas. I never got a bad story, never, ever once. And I was jealous because they all got to go on vacation and tell me about how beautiful it was. And when I went, I was not disappointed. It's an amazingly beautiful, beautiful country, beautiful people. I want to know more about them. And I think what we can do here is just to make those connections and build those relationships, because oftentimes I find there are Bahamians in New York and I didn't even know they were Bahamians. Like other groups kind of have their little hub and they have their group. I think we should spend a little time investing in the culture abroad as well, bringing people together and knowing who's who and who's where. And then, of course, working in this field that I work in and just seeing the possibilities for connections and relationships with any country, any place. I look at ways that it's possible for me to build those partnerships with places like the Bahamas. For example, we have a worldwide nursing shortage. And New York is no different, especially, and this existed even before the pandemic. So imagine it's even worse now. And as governments try to look for places that we can get people to work, I think of the Bahamas. I think providing that opportunity, nurses, they are needed, great salaries, and maybe there's interest to help bring that kind of opportunity as a career. So I would love to talk about ways that we can do that, and even the business relationships that exist now. The world is different, and we have to look at ways to empower Black people everywhere in terms of what we are, what we're able to participate in. So those are just some examples. I have no criticism of the Bahamas. I'm sure the issues that I face right here in my district every day are the same as they are faced in other similar communities. We deal with trying to bring people out of poverty. We deal with trying to create employment, create business opportunities, create educational, childcare. There are a lot of social issues that we're trying to deal with in terms of our communities. And I think that, the Bahamas is probably no different. But when I went, it was beautiful, perfect days every day. And the people were beautiful, the culture, the music, everything about it. And we need to, one last thing. I think that if we can bring that culture here, one of the things that I did in working in government, even before I was a senator, was I would bring our culture because I wanted it, but I would bring it to things that I would do. So every year I do a Kwanzaa party, and I said I wanted things from the diaspora. So there's a great person in New York, Beryl Edgecombe, and her husband who recently passed, Wendell Edgecombe. They have the Bahamian American Cultural Society. And I would have them come and teach the children how to make Junkanoo masks, and then afterwards have their own Junkanoo parade. And it was such a hit. I have children who were children at the time who are now adults telling me, do you still do that? Do you still do the junk? They remember it. So the culture is very attractive, and it draws people in, and they loved it. They had never heard of Junkanoo before, but just bringing that culture to them really meant a lot. So I just like to continue to build bridges.
Very good. As Scott Turnquest, we are the third border of the United States of America. And there are many Bahamians who believe that our Bahamian culture has been somewhat diluted because of what has been called cultural imperialism, and because of our proximity to the United States of America. Your feelings, your views on that?
So I think that some of that exists. I think that I probably observed some of that growing up. But I think that we as a country still have an identity that is distinct, and that still persists. And I see that every time I travel back home, speak to a friend back home, or run into Bahamians here, whether it is something that you might consider more surface level, like the way that we speak, or the food that we eat, or the music that we listen to, or something deeper, I'm constantly reminded that it exists. But I think that this is where I would actually just repeat some of the things that Ole said, which is that we do have a very distinct identity that is unique to us. But I think that a lot of times when we hear that, it is put relative to some other country or some other culture that is perhaps more well-known outside of their own country. So whether it is Jamaica or the British or the Australians, or pick your country, I think that it's often done in comparison or in relative terms to that. And I couldn't really explain why that's the case. I sometimes think that it might be a function of size, but it could be something else, and I just don't know the answer. Then to the point about cultural imperialism, so the years in which I grew up, I would say that that's probably always existed to a point. It's just that for many folks, it's more recently the United States. So to date myself, I was born in '78, and so I grew up in school through the '80s. and then I graduated in 96. And what I tell people a lot on the idea of like cultural imperialism or cultural influence, is I share with people that I think that I observed that transition from British culture or British imperialism transitioning over to the United States. So whether it was the kinds of teachers I had in school through middle school and the spelling that was allowed, being like British spelling, or even the products that I saw on shelves in stores, I think that I remember looking back in time and all of that transitioning away from the British influence over to the U.S. influence. So I would actually argue that it is something that has always existed for us. It is just that the United States is a newer phenomenon, right? Vis-a-vis the British influence. But that's been my observation and my experience.
Dr. Adderley, you are an historian. You've written on slavery and I'm sure other aspects of Bahamian history. Do you see at all, or do we feel what has been described as the Americanization of Bahamian culture? Have we moved toward a more American lifestyle over these almost 50 years of independence?